Okay, good evening and welcome to our third lecture of the semester of the American Cause. I'm Professor DeRosa, and of course we have CFO Atwater, and we're really pleased and appreciate you taking time to address the community here. Francisco Gonzalez from the James Madison Institute up in Tallahassee. I'm going to take a couple of minutes just to introduce what the American Cause is all about. I'll turn it over to Francisco. He's going to say a few words about JMI and introduce our guest speaker. And we'll have a Q&A session. We're going to open it up to the students first, and then media and guests to FAU are more than welcome to ask questions. So we're going to run not much past 7:30 if we need that much time. Okay? So the American Cause. What is the American Cause? Well, the American Cause is a title borrowed from a book written in the early 1950s by Russell Kirk. And Russell Kirk was a scholar that talked about the American founding quite a bit. And he discussed the relationship between government and society, or you might say the state and society. And we all know these are very interesting times as we're trying to figure out the appropriate and or constitutional role of government and how it impacts individual liberty. Now, just sort of as a starting point, we know that America ratified the United States Constitution in 1789, and it was designed to protect and to secure individual liberty. Now, some might argue that individual liberty has eroded over the last several generations. And we're at a point now that we're really trying to struggle. What is the proper role of government vis-a-vis individual liberty, individual responsibility, a free society, a market economy, free enterprise? And hopefully we're going to address and at least flesh out some of those issues here this evening. Okay? I want to familiarize you with Russell Kirk's The American Cause, just read a passage towards the end of the book. And this passage has the title, Social Justice, True and False. And here at the university, we hear quite a bit about social justice, right? We're going to have a guest speaker tomorrow, and I think that's going to be the context of his presentation. What is social justice? And behind that concept is this ongoing debate, this battle of ideas of individual liberty vis-a-vis the role of government. This is what Russell Kirk wrote. Now think about this. I'll read it slowly, but just think about some of the points that he's making. So the free economy, characterized by liberty of choice, private ownership of capital, and competition, is a bulwark of all freedom. It is also a bulwark of justice. Justice, we ought not to forget, means to each his own. To each the things that suit his own nature. Zealots for economic collectivism talk a great deal about social justice, by which they mean that all people ought to have an equal share in the world's goods. Closely examined, however, their theories can produce only social injustice. For once applied, those theories deprive men and women of the rewards that belong to their nature. Even Karl Marx knew that communism must treat unfairly, in any established meaning of the word fairness, the abler and more talented people. Quote, in order to establish equality, Marx wrote in Das Kapital, we must first establish inequality. End of quote. By this he meant that communistic state will take away from the strong, the clever, the thrifty, the ingenious, the dependable, from all the people who have unusual abilities and savings, and will give their property and their product of their energies to the weak, the dull, the improvident, the routine-minded, the slack. Wow, that's pretty controversial, isn't it? How many of you have heard your professors read that in class within this context? For complete equality of condition in this world can be established only if a society is willing to penalize the better natures in order to benefit the less gifted natures. Wow. That's why the university is the marketplace of ideas. That's what we are here to discuss. If we believe in the idea of justice that lies at the root of classical and Christian thought, such an undertaking would not be justice, but gross injustice. It was denied to the most of the better men and women the things that belong to their nature, the rewards of private integrity. So that gives you an idea of the worldview and or the perspective of Russell Kirk. But that's not unique. That used to be common knowledge in the United States. Publius in the Federalist Papers, in Federalist number 10, said the first responsibility of government is to protect the diversity and the faculties of men from which the rights of private property originate. The role of government, according to the framers, is not to redistribute the government, or property, I should say, but to protect it. And when your property is conceded to the government, allegedly, supposedly, under the original constitutional rule of law, it has to be predicated upon the consent of the property owner. Now, you could understand why the Constitution is not very fashionable today. Those are very old ideas that many have forgotten or choose to forget and choose to work against. But we have to make a decision. And that decision is, do we still want to maintain the rule of law, the constitutional federated republic that the framers established? Or do we want to do something else with our system of government? Because they didn't trust government. They did not trust men and women to have power over individuals' property rights, because that power would be abused. So that's the American cause from the framers' perspective, and Russell Kirk and the American cause seminars that we put on helps us to flesh out, to think about, and consider, do we still want to hold on to those principles? Okay, so Francisco, if you would.
Well, thank you for all being here today, and that was a great introduction by Professor DeRosa, and he's just done a marvelous job putting together this seminar throughout. I know this is the second year he's been running it, and we've been working with Professor DeRosa for a number of years now, not only passing these founding principles on to students, but also to teachers, helping them teach their students as well. So he's just done a great job, and we're happy to have him involved with the James Madison Institute in that way. Well, I wanted to just give you all, I know many of you have come here and probably have heard me as well at the various seminars we've done this semester. I just want to give you a real quick run through the James Madison Institute is. We're a research and public policy organization based in Tallahassee. We put out public policy ideas for Floridians, and we're in Tallahassee for a reason, hopefully to affect some of these elected officials and show them the light, or as Ronald Reagan said, if you can't show them the light, bring the heat, right? And so anyway, so we like to basically shed some light on things and all sorts of things, education, healthcare, transparency in government, all sorts of issues that we focus on. But in addition, in about the last 4 years, we've been interested in doing something more than just talking to our elected officials, but also bringing these constitutional principles to light to young people across the state. And we do that in seminars like this, and trying to basically bring back discussion, if you will, about those founding principles. And there's been a lot of debate about this over the last 4 or 5 years, maybe going back further actually, but I think many people are seeing, bloated government deficits and trying to wonder what is our individual responsibility, and also our our own personal debt. I mean, I think you're going to show some figures up here that might be revealing. So I was looking through his slides earlier. So But anyway, so we try to do that and teach young people from high school students to college students about the founding principles through various means, curriculum guides, events, and things like that. So I just welcome you here. And also, I put a few JMI materials in the back. We've got a few extra copies of Russell Kirk's book here for those that didn't get it at a previous seminar, although you might have to race up here afterwards. There's only a couple left. But if there's not any more left, please let us know, and we'll maybe try to get you a copy after the seminar. Those books as well were provided by an organization I also had the privilege to work with beforehand. I want to thank them, the Intercollegiate Studies Institute. For more on them, I would just visit their website, isi.org. But ISI was able to provide those books for us. And it's interesting because I'm actually a graduate of FAU. And I graduated here in '01. And then I went on to the University of Maryland. And while I was there, actually, somebody from ISI gave me one of those books. That was actually the first book I received from ISI and the first book I've ever read from Russell Kirk. And it was an eye-opening book for me because it really articulated in just a really succinct fashion the founding principles, political, economic, and moral, and how, for me, the best thing I got out of it was how all of Western civilization for thousands of years came together in the miracle of Philadelphia and the Constitution. And so our founders didn't just do something unique to that day. They were just well-educated men, and they took all of the Western canon from the philosophy of Athens, the experiment with democracy there, direct democracy that failed. They took the rule of law of Rome. They took the economic principles of what is now become modern Europe, trade and things like that. Think about Adam Smith and his writings, which just happened to coincide in 1776. So they took all these different things, Montesquieu, and they just really put it together in this unique document that is the most unique document in human history written by men. And so we have a treasure here to hold on to. And so that's what I think Professor DeRosa and CFO Atwater come together to really talk about the principles in this treasure and how we can't lose them. So thank you for being here. And if you want to learn more about the James Madison Institute, you can just go to our website, jamesmadison.org. Lots of great information up there. We'll also put a video of this presentation there if you want to view it later or show it to others. Now I'm privileged to introduce our guest speaker. We're really glad to have him here. Jeff Atwater is a fifth-generation Floridian, and he was sworn in, I guess he was elected in November of 2010 as our state's Chief Financial Officer. And the Chief Financial Officer, I'm going to get into that in just a minute here, but because you're probably scratching your head going, what does that position do? But before I do that, he has a long career in public service, but he also began in the private sector as well. He has worked as a community banker for more than 25 years. He has so many unique insights from that field that he brings with him to his current position. He's got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, a bachelor's degree of finance and a master's of business administration from the University of Florida. And he's been very active in the community here. He serves on all sorts of boards, the United Way of Palm Beach County, the Boy Scouts of America, the Children's Home of Society of Broward County, and you can read more about that. But he started as the vice mayor of North Palm Beach in 1993 in public service. And he was elected in 2000 as into the Florida House of Representatives. 2 years later, he ran and won a Florida Senate seat. And then, here in Florida, we have term limits, so you could only serve in the Senate for 8 years. But in 2008, he became the Senate president of the Florida Senate and led that body for 2 years. And then in 2010 was elected CFO. And I just pulled some things off the CFO's website so you can begin to understand what the CFO does. First of all, the CFO is part of the governor's cabinet. He's one of 3 people in the governor's cabinet. The other 2 are the Attorney General and the Commissioner of Agriculture. We have a very unique state here, Florida. So he also oversees the state's accounting and auditing functions. He oversees unclaimed property. He monitors the investment of state funds and manages the deferred compensation program, as well as the risk management program for the state of Florida. And he oversees the insurance Consumer Services, and also insurance fraud investigation. And I'd like you to update us on how many people you've actually had arrested in the state of Florida, saving us money, because that's been great. He's also, believe it or not, the state fire marshal. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that as well. But anyway, he has all of these duties that come together uniquely under his title, the Chief Financial Officer. But most importantly, he's a pretty good tennis player. So I'm going to introduce him with that. Thank you so much.
Francisco, thank you. I appreciate it. He happens to be a world-class tennis player, so when I get that from Francisco, that's pretty nice. And it is great that I could be on an agenda that JMI is participating in. And I would hope that you will take time to go to their website as a elected representative of the people of Florida to serve in the legislature and now serving as your Chief Financial Officer. I can tell you the wisdom, the care, the research that they put into a product is second to none and extremely valuable to those who are called to make decisions on your behalf on public policy. So it's great to be with you, Francisco, and JMI. And Dr. DeRosa, thank you that you'd consider including me in part of this series and having a chance to share a perspective with the students today. And I'm looking forward to that. But frankly, looking forward to the question and answer more than anything else, because I think that's where we might really get down to what's on someone's mind and a clarification of a point or offering the alternative perspective that they might not find that I hold as close or as dear as they themselves, and challenge me on that. So I'm looking forward to that. What a privilege. I have put down some thoughts that I'd like to share, and unique to this conversation that I was asked to have with you today about why economic freedom matters. And I know, because I put them down to paper, that it might look like this truly is a lecture, that I'm actually lecturing. I don't mean for it to come across that way. Just points that I think I have a perspective that I'd like to share with you given the conversation, and then really move on to the question and answer period. I think will be most valuable. But I put this down, these 4 points here, because maybe like yourselves, I've walked into student-teacher conversations and found the teacher just begin, or the lecturer just begin, or the professor just begin, and I wonder, where are we headed? And so I thought, well, I'd like to just touch on 4 things. Where did we start? Where are we now? What has worked? And where do we go from here? As at least points along the way that you'll know the markers are there. Where did we start? Dr. DeRosa already covered this. I'm saying it this way. The summer of 1787, 55 patriots, new Americans, met in the Pennsylvania State House, and I quote this, for the sole purpose, an express purpose, of revising the Articles of Confederation that they had been operating under as states. The delegates ranged in age from 26 years old, Jonathan Dayton, he was from New Jersey, to a 30-year-old named Alexander Hamilton, a name maybe more familiar, from New York, to the oldest, Benjamin Franklin, 81 years old, from Pennsylvania, to include, by the end of that exercise, an individual that had an extraordinarily important role, a 36-year-old from Virginia by the name of James Madison, who now we frequently call the father of the Constitution. The average age was 44 of that Confederation that gathered. What resulted from that convention was a bold and innovative grand national experiment that would forever redefine the relationship between people and their government. As you know, it was the birth of the Constitution. It was structured to offer us the following. It created 3 branches of government, described the powers of each branch and their connection to one another, outlined the interaction between citizens and its government, and described the relationship between the national government and the states. Under the Constitution, the federal government does have a role in the national economy. The power to tax, to regulate interstate commerce, and set the national currency. But most importantly, the Constitution limits the reach of the federal government into the everyday lives of Americans. It abolished restrictions of trade among states, creating the world's first modern free trade area. This freedom to trade unleashed opportunities for specialization and exchange, fueling economic growth and a new prosperity. The founders understood that without economic freedom as a result of a limited government, liberty would never be fully realized. Yet, many issues that some Americans today have come to see as the responsibility of government, economic stimulus, job creation, universal health care, and the like, would be viewed from our founders' perspective as so outside the role of government that they generally would not have even offered an opinion on it. To say then, very often the lack of guidance is actually very wise guidance. Now, it is always possible to read too much into motivations of persons in the past, but in regards to economic freedom, our founders left clear counsel to keep government out of markets. They also had a strong belief about the role of government in incurring debt. Madison famously stated, "I go on the principle that a public debt is a public curse." Thomas Jefferson, 1789. I wish it were possible to obtain a single amendment to our Constitution. I would be willing to depend on that alone for the reduction of the administration of our government to the genuine principles of the Constitution, meaning just that one amendment that he would want could bring us back just the very first year to what he believed to be the genuine principle of the Constitution. And to that he added, an additional article taking from the federal government the power to borrow. Jefferson would argue in his second inaugural address that the United States should meet within the year all expenses of the year without encroaching on the rights of future generations by burdening them with the debts of the past. It was universally recognized by our founders that there is no freedom in bankrupting a nation and no responsibility in passing on the obligations of the present to a future generation. Where are we now? Our current state of economic affairs may be challenging to say the least. The federal debt, over $15.5 trillion. So large that the debt is estimated to be about $138,000 per American taxpayer. These numbers are huge and difficult to grasp, so why don't we think about this in terms of the average Floridian? Let me see if this will work. The average Floridian's take-home pay of $39,500. That's the green ball. But imagine if the average Floridian was behaving as our federal government, and notwithstanding that they only brought in $39.5 million a year, they were committed to spending $62,000 a year. And then imagine they're doing this all the while with a debt that's growing, but presently at $292,000 on their back. Well, anyone can see that that math is not sustainable. In 1960, the federal government operated with a budget of $682 billion. Total federal budget, 1960, adjusted for inflation. Today, our government's budget has grown to $3.1 trillion. Now, if you would just take 1960 and bring it to the present, 2011, and adjust for inflation, you might think that's where we're at. But after you brought $1960 to 2011 adjusted for inflation, you would then have to multiply it times 5 to get to the present budget. Over the past 50 years, our government has come up with program after program, all the while piling deficit upon deficit to culminate in the spending explosion we are currently experiencing. Our nation has long been described as a land of opportunity where one can rise or fall based upon their own talents. A 1782 publication entitled Letters from an American Farmer said this of our newly founded country: "It is here, then, that the idle may be employed, the useless become useful, and the poor can become rich. But all nations understand and embrace, but not all nations will understand and embrace the power of opportunity." The book that's been discussed here already tonight, Kirk's American Cause, describes communism as the ownership of all property collectively, in the distribution of all goods and services according to need, regardless of the individual differences and private rights. We can all recite from the Declaration of Independence those certain unalienable rights which we are each endowed with from our Creator: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the last right I'd like to focus on tonight, the pursuit of that happiness specifically. We are in that pursuit because in this country we have hope. We have hope because in this country we are told we have opportunity. A country that would stifle or limit opportunity is not a place where we Americans would want to move to, nor it is a place that we would want to wish on a generation to follow us. Yet we have seen unprecedented expansion in the percentage of our population that now depends upon the government for some form of assistance. The unsustainably high debt threatens our economic stability, is a direct result of the government spending on the social programs that now dwarf every other category of federal spending. In 1969, not that long ago, only 12% of Americans paid no income tax. Today, it's 47% that pay no federal income tax, which now means from the IRS, the top 10% of all income earners pay 70% of all the federal taxes. The top 50% pay 97% of all federal taxes. Our government spending cannot be covered by taxing the rich, the super rich, the kind of rich, or the not so rich. It is the spending that is our problem. In 1965, the federal budget, 28% was on entitlements. That was the 1965 budget. 2011, 65% is now spent on entitlements. As a nation, we have arrived at the point where half the population relies on the other half to provide a portion of its needs. And you would have to ask yourself, from the very first point of the night, whether any of our founders could ever have envisioned a day in this country where half the population believed itself to be entitled to the perspiration and the sacrifice and the risk-taking of the other half. My fear is that America is emerging as an entitlement society. We are embracing state-driven economic models out of Western Europe, while turning from the individualistic impulses that spawned independence, fueled the growth of a nation, drove innovation, and frankly, inspired the world. We have only to glance across the Atlantic to see what would become of our future. Government throughout Europe, they revel in the canard that state-provided medical care, guaranteed education, government housing, subsidies, all the while constitute a sustainable social model. History shows otherwise. Now, just 2 weeks ago, the United States House of Representatives passed a budget that called for reductions in spending, including social programs, and we heard cries that it would lead to job cuts and economic disaster. It's not so bad that government social programs have been tried. The problem is that their good intentions continue to outweigh their ineffectiveness. From housing to food to health care to education, government programs keep popping up everywhere. The resulting increase in applications from these programs are interpreted by our government as an increase in need. So naturally, the response from government is to expand the programs and putting more money so that more people can be helped out of poverty. Thus begins and thus continues this vicious cycle that has created a class of permanent dependence on the taxpayer at an ever-increasing expense. Jefferson had also said this when asked, what does he see for the future of America? I predict a future of happiness for Americans if they can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them. What is important to remember is that every cent that the federal budget is made up of was first extracted from you and me. The federal government has no money of its own. Whatever it has or calls its own was removed from the private sector of the economy. It's foolish to believe that dollars we are obligated to give the government can be taken away from us, sent through an enormous, centralized, terminally wasteful bureaucracy, and returned to us in a more creative way than if we ourselves had decided how to utilize it, how to contribute to charity, or how to create the next job. You can't create greater opportunity and prosperity in the private sector by constantly extracting an even greater percentage of the resources of the private sector. Contrary to both history and common sense, however, the money needed to create new jobs and innovation continues to be seized through increasing taxes, which are then used by government programs that both waste money in the present and create a dependence of more money to be wasted in the future. For years, we have created a system that has removed what has made our country great. And that, again, is opportunity. By removing opportunity, by way of discouraging hard work and innovation, you remove the fuel of wealth creation and prosperity. What's worse is that it ultimately hurts everyone, first us in the United States, and then the rest of the globe as well. What has worked? When was the last time you heard of a communist country developing a new medical breakthrough, a pharmaceutical therapy that would benefit all of humankind? Those countries lack the key ingredients of economic freedom that allow individuals the right to decide how they use their talents and their resources, and for what return they will risk everything, including their personal reputation. The key ingredients are personal choice, the voluntary exchange coordinated by markets, the freedom to enter, to compete. It is the competition through free markets and the freedom to pursue that drives the imagination to create. Throughout the decades, American ingenuity and innovation has fueled amazing breakthroughs that have improved the quality of life not only for Americans, but for all humanity. Just take note of these. Jonas Salk saved millions of lives when he developed the vaccine for polio at age 42. Charles Goodyear, age 39, developed the process for vulcanizing rubber, now creates our tires. Thomas Edison, age 32, invented the light bulb, Alexander Graham Bell, age 29, invented the telephone. Stephen Jobs, in a garage, age 21, created Apple. Bill Gates, age 20, created Microsoft. How different would the world be if these and the countless other American innovators didn't have the economic freedom that enabled them to use their ingenuity and hard work to create and improve the conditions under which they lived? In 1957, the year that Kirk released The American Cause, the Soviet Union launched a basketball-sized homing device into space. And they thought they won the space race. But 12 years later, Americans would put Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon and plant the American flag in person to win the space race. Even when government participated in the innovation, we could always do more with less as Americans. For instance, we never spent more than 7% of our GDP on defense during the Cold War. The Soviets spent 30% of their GDP, and they couldn't keep up with us. Other countries believe government must redistribute wealth, regulating how much success people have so that everyone gets a fair share. Our country's prosperity has been realized, not by acts of government, but rather risk-taking individuals testing their skills in free markets that our government was designed to honor and protect. In economic freedom, which empowers individuals to pursue their own rewards in markets so they're free to rise, free to fall, on their own road to success or happiness as they choose it. Alexander Hamilton, one of those delegates at that first convention, put it this way: true liberty, by protecting the exertions of talent and industry, tends more powerfully than any other cause to augment the mass of national wealth. Where do we go from here? As outlined in The American Cause, the American government, from its conception, was focused on playing a limited role in the economic affairs of its citizens. The idea has always been that it's not the role of government to create jobs, but to create the environment where people can pursue their dreams with minimal interference. All the great innovation mentioned a moment ago that have brought the improved quality of life to people across the globe have been the result of individuals who had big ideas and a government committed to staying out of their way. In other countries, risk-taking is discouraged, but not in this country. We are encouraged to take a risk and take a chance, be productive. The question we should ask ourselves is this: how can you pursue happiness if you don't have the means to do so? The pursuit of happiness, a fundamental tenet to liberty, requires the rights to enjoy the fruits of one's labor. And it requires economic freedom. There are dozens of countries in the world who deny economic freedom to their citizens. Most of these countries that you might have noticed are in a financial crisis. And of course, none of them can come close to comparing to America's track record of innovation over the last 200 years. So then why would we be following them down the path toward a social welfare state if we know what will happen when we get there? But for those who just want to be given something, I'd suggest that you pick another place outside the United States where someone will buy your housing, buy your lunch, buy your health care, and guarantee you a 6-week vacation. That's not who we were designed to be. And we as Americans should not apologize for an American ideal of self-reliance and self-determination. Why does economic freedom matter? It matters because economic freedom is intertwined with liberty. You can't have one without the other. To take away economic freedom and thus liberty, there can be no pursuit of happiness. This would steal from America the very essence of what made us who we are, and what President Lincoln would say, the last great hope on earth. Our country was founded by leaders with a God-given ability to look beyond the horizon and see the great challenges that would face the nation. Throughout our history, there was much opportunity to veer off course, to make easy choices, and to take the route of least resistance. However, with each trial and hardship, our country found the character and the determination to make the difficult decisions to prevail. The difficult economic issues we face today will only be overcome if we confront them, as we did in the past, head-on, with American resolve and ingenuity. Many of our elected representatives have forgotten the resolve that America's grit that forged innovation and served as a beacon for the rest of the world. Well, it's not every day that I quote a Frenchman. But a Frenchman I know you've probably heard of, Alex de Tocqueville. After being in America in the 1830s, said this: "The greatness of America lies not in being more enlightened than other nations, but rather in her ability to repair her faults." Our great country is far from perfect, but it's a result of the great experiment that the world has ever witnessed. Each of you in this room pursuing your education is accepting your responsibility for your own path and to make your contribution to our country's future. And I'm confident that our country's future is bright because I believe our founding principles are sound. I'm confident because America will produce a catalyst for real change. Some of you will graduate from FAU, will seek further degrees, or will join the workforce, start your own business. And I wish you well in all of that. My goal as your Chief Financial Officer is to make sure that every dollar that is extracted for your state government is deployed wisely. I can't guarantee you economic success, nor can I guarantee you happiness. But every day I work to ensure that Florida's economic freedom is there, that people will choose Florida as the place to test their skills and pursue their dreams. As long as we as a country are focused on ensuring our policies and institutions are supportive of economic freedom, generations yet to come will enjoy that very same inalienable right that the founders wrote about, the pursuit of happiness. Thank you for the chance to be with you. Now, can I take some questions?
Certainly. Thank you, CFO Atwater. So, let's start with the students. Any questions for Florida CFO? Questions and/or comments? Yes, sir.
How do you believe the universal health care would affect Florida's economy?
Well, let's say, if I could put it in the context of what I've shared today, the Universal Health Care Act continues to throw, first of all, let me say this technically, it throws a broader and broader net under what was an original intention that someone on their worst day could, for a brief period of time, have care when they don't have access to it. And we as compassionate people would want that. But it is now throwing such a broad net as to who would be included in to be receiving that free care that it would add hundreds of millions of dollars in new expense to all taxpayers to cover those who would now be brought underneath the system. So today, in a state budget of $70 billion, the one line item that provides that kind of care, which is Medicaid, is $21 billion. So one line item surpasses all the criminal justice system, all the general government systems, almost as large as education, far surpasses higher education. One line item to provide a temporary medical care for those who cannot afford it themselves. which is becoming permanent care under this system. And you would have to either raise taxes significantly in Florida to cover it, or drastically reduce what the state of Florida is already spending in building of roads and providing for education to cover it. So it would be a significant impact on Florida's economy. Either you would stop building roads, close your judicial system, close schools to cover it, or you would extract a significant amount of money out of the marketplace to now cover it. And that's what's so dangerous. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How do you strike a balance between balancing the budget or reducing deficits, but at the same time possibly thinking about corporate subsidies to entice people to move to Florida or businesses to move to Florida to create jobs and stimulus? It seems as if you're taking providing for large corporations that can take advantage of those subsidies instead of small businesses that might not have the resources to do that as well. How do you strike that balance?
Wow, that is an excellent question. The question was, how do you strike the balance between subsidies that you would offer to the marketplace that might attract certain capital that present players couldn't take advantage of, I guess, versus other types of...
Sure, like larger companies can...
Sure, okay.
The attorneys and
Yeah, right, right. That's an excellent question. Because I think you would look at this in terms of, let me say, if you back up the first step and kind of say, look, our role is to create the environment for success. And if you can create the environment for success, then you shouldn't have to be deeply involved in giving away subsidies to attract that capital to find its way to you. Because believe me, those players who are out there, who are looking around from where they're at the moment to the 49 other experiments in state government, are going to choose the place that is most attractive. And that could be less litigation, less regulation, less taxation, more extraordinary educational offerings and experience of the workforce, quality of life on top of that, all those things. And so I think that that we, as one particular player in that experiment, one of the 50 states, if we can continue to offer that broader quality of indexes, we shouldn't have to be worrying about, as a state, as to laying out the incentives to attract others here that are going to be possibly in the very same industry of an up-and-comer that would say to us, my goodness, I've been loyal to Florida, I've been paying my taxes in Florida, property taxes in Florida, hiring Florida workers, and it may be true that I only have 350 employees, but I never asked for someone to hand me $5 million to relocate or build my new building. And that $5 million just brought to Florida somebody that now I need to compete with. And how fair is that? So I think in balancing that, a far greater focus needs to be just spent on the environment itself, and not our goal to try to be moving places based upon or attracting capital based upon dollars. And I think we have tremendous opportunity to be doing that here in Florida. And I think it's an excellent point, because the real backbone of our state, and frankly of the country we know it, is the small business owner, the person with less than 50 employees, in fact less than 10. And there is no way that we could run around thinking that the government would be passing out incentives for those companies, nor are they asking for it. They're just trying to ask for an environment where they can feel like they can have a consistency to do their business and to create a new job and have us off their back. I think if we do that, we should be fine without trying to create that. The only thing that I would suggest under maybe that topic is that we have been further in the economic trough than the average of the other 49 states during this recession. And that has been because of our present economy here in this state. When your strength is building second homes for retirees, building homes for those who would like to relocate to the South on retirement, places to come for corporate conferences, all the conference space that we have in Florida, tourism destination, respite to come and enjoy our beaches and our sun, that in an economic downturn, if that's what we were driven by, no business was going to take a corporate retreat, you know, with the earnings that they were suffering, or the lack of earnings that they were suffering. And people could not sell the house in Jersey or New York or Michigan or Illinois to come here. That the point might be, if we are going to see that we can help seed a changing and an evolving economy in Florida, a diversifying our economy in Florida, how could we go about doing that versus just laying something down there to attract just a job itself? That has merit. And then I think you have to really be careful on, again, who you're going after and why. And then be very careful about that return on investment. Yes?
One of the things that troubled me about the last legislative session was kind of the gamesmanship that goes on, like Senator Hayes calling parent empowerment because one of his bills wasn't taken out of budget, or the House not passing the budget until the Senate passed PIP. Do you think that hinders the public policy-making process, or that is just like a necessary evil?
Yeah. The question was, and I'm repeating this for the sake, I think some of this is being taped, and so to come through. The question was, does the gamesmanship that goes on in the legislative process hinder the quality of the policy making, or is it just a part of something we have to accept and deal with? I think it clearly I think it diminishes the public trust in the outcome. Whatever be the source of information that the general public receives, usually is somewhat accurate. I mean, I've been in the process, so I know it's not always accurate, but the ones you just cited are accurate. So whatever your information source, it looks like a quid pro quo or a trade, or I'll give you this when you give me that, or I don't care if the whole ship goes down if I don't get what I want. That is the reality of what goes on in Tallahassee. And I would tell you that everybody exercises in that process the leverage that they hold. And if a senator or a House member or one chamber can hold out for the other to find its way closer to something that they believe is necessary, that is part of, you'd have to say, even though it's extraordinarily painful to watch, and I understand that, that wisdom that the founders created from the outset, a short term with very tight geographically designed district, which often means a consensus of maybe philosophy or ideology of your constituency, pitted against a chamber with a longer term in office, with a broader diversity of an electorate, creates the very collision that they wanted. And it's not that attractive sometimes. So it is the nature of the instruments, yes. But I will say that I have seen it where it has effectively provided for extraordinarily valuable input into getting people to at least having to debate an issue of our time, rather than to avoid debating the issue of our time. And I would just tell you, not that that's the question, but I think one of the most important aspects of citizen representation in this legislative process is to debate the issue of your time and not be afraid of it, and not use procedures to keep it in the corner, or the other chamber didn't take it up, or they won't take it up. All of these are leverages to force people to debate the issue of our time, and that's why you ran for office, to debate the issue of your time, and don't be afraid. And I think that is part of the calling that some would often like to avoid. Yes?
What is your opinion about the recent $300 million cut in the state university system just took?
Yeah, the question was, tell us about, offer perspective, opinion on the $300 million that was just cut in the university system's budget. And in fact, I just had the privilege before walking in to visit with you to be sitting with your president. And clearly that was top on her mind. And, well, let's walk through it. And again, I won't labor this too long. but to all kind of the things that we've talked about here. I believe that financial capital follows intellectual capital. I believe that our universities and higher ed are extraordinary economic engines, okay? So to that extent, we should decide that we're going to have an exceptional higher educational system. At the same time, you have to say to yourself, can we really run 11 world-class universities all at the same time, all seeking similar disciplines? And I think so all that I think are out there, or reality. And then you have a case, let me just go over this one, which we didn't show you. When the recession began in Florida, and you can go back to 2006, 2007, but for us, hitting us, we had general revenue in the state of Florida. That is, general revenue for the state of Florida is sales tax that you pay when you buy a shirt, set of tires. General revenue is corporate income taxes that corporations pay on their income. General revenue is a dock stamp, a transaction tax on buying a tangible piece of property like real estate. Add all those together, and in 2008, $28 billion. 30 months later, $21 billion. That's what we lost. So, an exercise that the legislature goes through is a prioritizing of what it believes to be the public priorities. And I can assure you that as they were looking to figure out how to, over the last 3 or 4 years now, how to make all of this work without extracting more money from the marketplace so that it could get back up on its feet, that it had to prioritize where would it find reductions so that we could make our way through this without extracting more from the marketplace. They went to transportation, they went to the criminal justice system, they went to K through 12, they went to healthcare, they went to higher ed. And I think the biggest concern that I would have is that our university system coming together, defining their strengths and purpose in seeking funding for those. In other words, my point would be, we don't need 11 law schools. We don't need 11 med schools. We don't need the top 11 Division I football teams in the country. If Florida Atlantic chooses its priorities, that is what, as a board of trustees and in working with the board of governors, should be clear and should be respected by the state legislature, because they would be speaking to the priority that that university has developed, as both as a regional university, as in a university that could offer extraordinary disciplines and fields that it's chosen to excel in. And don't shortchange those, don't diminish those. But right now, we have a university system where 11 universities are all fighting to do all the exact same things. And that is going to be very difficult for a state to continue to fund and think that we can create 11 universities across all disciplines being world class. So when I talked to the president just a short while ago, she talked about the priority of marine life, the coastal life, the aging that takes place in a state like Florida, geriatrics, health care for that, energy sources from the Gulf Stream. Boy, you focus on those things, and FAU can be, will be world class. What should Florida Gulf Coast focus on? Now, there's always going to be the set disciplines that I think are going to have expected of good quality, but what will you specialize in? And I think we as citizens with an expectations that our university system should establish those priorities, and that should be expected from, and that should be respected by the legislature. And when you, in the present, they're making a decision based across 11 universities that well, we'll just make a general reduction and we'll allocate this reduction across, not totally across the board, but almost across the board, without regard to discipline. And I think that is a mistake. And we can do better than that. I think that provoked other questions. Yes, well, whoever wants to go first. Yeah.
I just have a question in regards to what you were talking about. What sort of advice would you give to this university? Should we have built a football stadium, or do you think that maybe we should have focused on our programs, the ones that create a workforce for America in the future?
Well, all right. This is now good because now I know we're being taped. So I know this will be shared immediately. Universities are for places to test one's intellectual skill sets, to go out and master those skill sets. And that can be not, and I don't mean that to be purely intellectual, there are other skill sets that have to be mastered, whether technological skill sets, whether they're team working skill sets, organizational skill sets, managerial skill sets, to go out and make your contribution in the marketplace. And that's what it's for. And so, to the extent that a university chooses to have its name and its brand known for something else, whether it be in sporting endeavors, whether it be in something else, in my opinion, that university board of trustees better know how those are going to be funded and not be a distraction to the mission of the university. That said, and I'm not going to go back on any of that, within a system of 11 universities, there should be a university that has a capacity to take people's artistic talents and allow them to test that. They may be the finest pianists in the world. They may have an extraordinary capacity for art that will be of value to society, and that shouldn't be, looked at sideways or diminished. And that's a discipline of a choice, an educational a discipline that has value in the marketplace. But that is a responsibility for the trustees to decide that. And when I sat with your president just a short while ago, boy, it was absolutely, totally committed to that same thought process, that it would be the finest academic, intellectually challenging place that will bring the best of talent here. And she spoke with enthusiasm about your med school that started as a partnership, has been funded through great support not only of taxpayers, but of philanthropic giving, corporate giving, hospital partnerships that are going to be very, very valuable for us as a state. But her vision, I thought, was right on. Yes?
But how did you expect those prospective students to want to come to a university like FAU and say we didn't have maybe something like the football stadium or all the new other things that we try to incorporate and only specialize on one school? Because then wouldn't the 11 universities would then become just only specialized schools? It would kind of like keep the entire student population as a whole segregated to some extent, right?
Well, I'm just saying it's a matter of how you prioritize and fund that. That's all. Let me give you an example, which I think will shock you, because it certainly surprised me. We had venture capitalists come to Florida a few weeks ago. Venture capitalists, those individuals that put their money together to seed businesses in their early stages. And they chose to be on the campus of the University of Florida. And they're in my office, and I said, why did you choose the University of Florida? And they said, when it comes to technology transfer of innovative ideas that happen in laboratories on university campuses and make their way to the marketplace, the 3 top universities in the country are Stanford, MIT, and the University of Florida. So I say, well, that is a specific focus of the University of Florida. Now, we know they have a football team, and we know they have a baseball team and a gymnastics team, and they have all sorts of clubs and extracurricular activity that creates an environment for someone to test, again, all those skill sets to go out and be productive. Again, whether it's leadership in an organization, and again, I don't suggest any of those be eliminated from participation or from being available. It is a matter of funding that. And over time, Florida Atlantic University, like other universities, should consider that full campus experience or university experience can find that funding through the foundation of an athletic program that goes out and gains that support, sells marketing for a stadium, names a stadium, as you all have done. All those things, but they have to consider at the core, what are we here for? And why are we here? And that's why we're asking the taxpayers of Florida to foot that tab for the creation of the economic success of our state for the future. And I think it's a matter of that prioritization. And it will mean, yes, it will mean that there won't be 11 if there's ever 11 med schools in Florida, we've made a big mistake. But right now, 11 universities want their own med school. They won't tell you that, but they'd all like one. They would all like a football stadium. They would all like a law school. Okay? But the extraordinary is when an institution defines itself and sets its priorities. And I think that's a big issue with 11 universities. Someone will have the best business school, somebody will have the best med school, someone's going to have the best marine science school, and we should champion that as a state. Send the resources there as a state. And celebrate that as a state. Yes?
First, I'd just like to say I really enjoyed the presentation.
Oh, thanks.
And my question's kind of twofold. First, given your current position, what do you think the proper role of government is in the housing market at both the state and federal level? And then given your career in the banking industry, where do you see the housing market in Florida with our foreclosure rates and obviously at the national level for the next 2 to 5 years?
Right. The question, for the sake of being picked up, was the role of government in today's housing market and the present state of our Florida housing market and where we're probably at in the near term. I can tell you this, if it weren't for government, the present state of the housing market would not be this bad. And let's just be clear about that, okay? So you have a government, you have a Fed that decides with government pressure from a federal elected body, the Congress of the United States, that the historical equilibrium, okay, in home ownership in the 40s and the 50s as we came back from the global war and began to get our strength, and then into the 60s and 70s, was less than about 66% of the population actually owned a home. Now, government decided that equilibrium, people were choosing to live in an apartment until they were ready. People chose to live in a rented home because they were in transition, didn't know if they would stay in a particular place, found more freedom in that, whatever else, that equilibrium was not what was satisfactory. So they decided, okay, we will move that number up. And they designed all types of coercive activity to institutions to get the number up. And that meant making loans that you previously would not have made, okay? Then it said, that's not going fast enough. We've got Fannie and Freddie out there. We'll buy the loans off you and give you money for them so you can make another one. So now you're not even dealing with your own money, you're dealing with the house's money, kind of sort of speak. And now you're just going, all right, well, if that's what you want me to do, and you're buying them all from me, and I make a fee off each one that you take from me, that's what you're telling me to do. So what do? We change, then we keep the interest rates at a place, okay, that certainly you might find attractive to divert money towards that type of activity. And what we create is a surge in housing to individuals that historically weren't there, a number that could not afford being there if anything went wrong. And then when things started going wrong, it was really difficult for many Americans to be able to financially make it work. And the bottom fell out, and the government wrote it all off. And then, only as government could do, sued the banks. So first do it, or we won't let you grow. Do it, or we're going to penalize you. Do it, and we'll incent you. Then why did you do it? I mean, it was very interesting. So that's what's happened. And in Florida, it's catastrophic because Florida was able to, in a demographic that was wishing to relocate to Florida in retirement age, baby boomers moving, was significant economic activity in the construction of homes, in the selling of homes. And so here's kind of the reality of the moment. If you'd have gone back 5 years, on any given day, you could have looked at the calendar. There were about 50,000 single-family homes on the market in Florida. Today, there are 330,000 in foreclosure, all at the same time. Probably another 200,000 yet to come. And so you have an inventory now of what the market, where the equilibrium was, and so all of this has crushed value, crushed people's credit. Institutions have gone, in Florida, from 2002 to 2008, 5 banks failed. From 2008 to yesterday, 55 banks failed. So investors lost, but that's the marketplace, that's what happens. They made decisions. They may have had to make certain decisions, but they lost. The federal government certainly lost, which means all of us picked up that tab. And now you have that inventory. So you're trying to think of the average value of a home that sold in April of 06, 6 years ago, sold for $258,000. Last month, the average price was $129,000. So now we have 45% of our homes underwater, and 23% of our mortgages either significantly past due or in foreclosure. And that's our present situation. So we are on a slope up, but it is a very modest slope up, and it is going to be a hard walk for us, because with that kind of housing inventory, a workforce that did electric, did plumbing, did landscaping, did carpentry work, did roofing, that workforce is anxiously looking for that construction to begin again. And with that kind of inventory, it's going to take a while to absorb that. That's where we're at. Yes?
I don't think there's any question, that government spending needs to be, revisited and, thought out, in a better way. But at the same time, being that reforms are needed in that area, why, and forgive me if I seem to generalize, but why is it that most people who speak of reforming government spending, why can that not be coupled with a fairer tax system as well?
Yeah, I think the question was, we speak of reforms for our government, or the fixing some of the problems that exist, and I'll repeat it, you be sure I get it right, that you feel much of the conversation is about bringing spending in the line, and you believe there's need for that, but couldn't there be conversation as importantly as about a fairness of a tax structure? And that should be as part of the conversation as well. That's the question. I happen to agree with you. I think that the tax structure could be made fairer. We may disagree on how it's made more fair. I think tomorrow night there's going to be quite a conversation on an interpretation of fair. One I will wholeheartedly disagree with, but it'll be an interpretation of fairness. When your inflation in your population can no longer have any relative attachment point to where your spending is, then clearly the driving force is the spending. And so that's why I think more people go. That's where I go. I mean, there is no longer an association that once worked, if I'd had the graph back up here, that once would have said per capita with inflation, this is probably where the trajectory should be. We're completely off the scale now. And so for those of us and I think this is a majority of Americans, it's whether or not you kind of speak to this orientation or not, that there is something extraordinarily unique about our founding documents, about our relationship to our government, that is designed to protect our choices and our opportunity to pursue that pursuit of happiness as we see it. That is a unique instrument. It's different than almost anybody else's on the planet. Others have tried to embrace it with certain degrees of success. So that is saying in that document that we're not going to extract from you to create burdens upon another generation to pay for it, or to provide something that you wouldn't do for yourself with your innovative creativity that'll frankly change the world, as Americans have done. So you see the run rate that's off the chart, no relationship to population anymore, and then you see how it separates itself from founding documents, and it creates, for many of us, a disenchantment, a disappointment, a discouraging note that we will not quietly sit by and allow that change to take place. If that's what you want, it's not in this document. As I read it, go find it someplace else. Don't keep calling me the radical. I'm not the radical. If I can't find it in the Constitution, I don't know why you keep doing it, or keep creating rights that don't exist in the document itself. So, but I think your point is well taken, and that is, how could we create this? I think if all of us were given enough time and enough information and data, my hope is that we would never create the present tax code, that we would think we could do far better than this. And I really believe that a flat tax that is simple and clear and fair, that based upon my success, I pay that rate. And I will always be paying more than someone else who does not carry that same enthusiasm for the creation of wealth for themselves or creation of wealth for their corporation that they're building. They would pay same rate, but it's going to be lower on a lower amount earned. I would see that as simple and fair. And so what worries me is that if the IRS is correct, and let's maybe give them the benefit of the doubt, that the top 10% of the wage earners are already paying 70% of the income tax in the country. The top 50% are paying 97%. How do we think? And our problem is that we have deficits in debt that we can't ever repay, and that a next generation will have to have this extracted from their paycheck before we go broke, or no one will buy our treasuries. You'll have to pay it back. Your generation has to pay it back. And my generation's enjoying it without any consequence. That's what's going on here. I mean, the outrage should be from the next generation of the workforce saying, what were you people thinking? There's not one person in here whose parents would be running up a second mortgage or a third mortgage on the house if legally their children had to cover it when they pass on. Not a one parent, well, maybe some would do it, but no responsible parent would do it. And yet, that is exactly what we're doing now. The debt will come due, and you will have to pay it. And the ability to have economic freedom will be far more limited when your paycheck is being hit, to the extent it's going to have to be hit. But if 50% of the people are already paying 97% of the taxes in this country, and 45% aren't paying anything, I'm with you. I want reform. Because I don't believe that a country can sustain itself, as I mentioned before, when half the people wake up in the morning with the expectation that the other half is responsible for providing for them. That just doesn't work. And it won't work that much longer. But I think you've got a great point. I think tax reform is necessary. Do we have time for one last? Or we there?
We have time for one more question, and if anybody from the press.
Oh, okay, sure.
So do you mind if we run,
No, that's okay.
just a couple minutes
Okay.
over?
Yeah.
So one from a student, and then if somebody from the press would like to ask a question. Okay.
Yes.
In regards to the previous discussion about higher education in Florida, and some of the bizarre proposals from Tallahassee, I think a better solution would be for South Florida to secede from the rest of Florida, since FIU and FAU, we have been pretty consensus about what should be done, and a lot of this doesn't really align with the needs and desires of South Floridians. But in regards, you spoke a lot about like innovative capabilities and initiative enthusiasm. What innovations did you introduce in your banking career? Since I thought it was just like a deposit and boom. So I'd like to know your innovations in your career.
Yeah, thank you. The innovations in the career of banking. Let me tell you what, though. It is the mission of the financial institution to be a support player to someone's dreams and aspirations. And when the bank does that well, the bank is a place where people can put their deposits for greater security. Rather than under the mattress, rather than burying in the backyard, they can go and place those resources, those dollars, in a place where they believe has been tested by auditors and examiners and is safe and would be there when they need it. And when all those resources from a community, from community investors, are pooled together, someone on the same street wants to send a kid to college, wants to build onto their business, add a piece of machinery to the shop room floor. That is the role of that institution, is to help that community achieve financial success, not by its innovation, but by supporting the innovative, creative ideas that come from that community. And if it does it well, it works. When it believes it's smarter than the small business person that came for the loan, when it believes it knows the business better than they do, problems arise. When they turn their back on what have been historical good, solid data points as to what person's credit ratio should be, when they look the other way or when they are coerced into looking the other way, problems arise. But innovations that have taken place over time have made the availability to one's resources easier, and that's the investment in ATM machines, the investment in online banking. I bet, in my day, so dating myself, the only way when I was a paper boy back in the 60s, I had to physically, go to each one of the houses that I delivered papers to, collect the weekly amount for the newspaper, take it to the Miami Herald and the Palm Beach Post, give it to them. They'd cut me a paycheck. I'd then ride my bike to the institution on the corner, and I would make my deposit. And they would credit my little savings account, and then I would ask for $10 back to buy some Hot Wheels or something. But now, the banks allow that electronic transfer to take place. They electronically send the payment to the Palm Beach Post, to the Miami Herald. They then electronically, on behalf of the Miami Herald, credit the young paper boy's account. And the young paper boy goes on one of a number of websites and buys it online. And people would wonder who goes inside the bank anymore, But that's how it's different today. So it's ease of access, much faster information and access to your resources than ever before, and that's a positive. And that's a positive. But the mission really is that its responsibility, its charter, is to help the financial quality and the well-being of the community. We'll take some questions from your press that are here.
Any questions? Yes.
Ken Ward from Sunshine State News.
Hey, Ken.
Very, very simple question for you. If you were governor, would you sign or veto the energy bill, House Bill 7117? The reason I ask that, and I think we'll get to this, is based on your comments about economic freedom. That bill contains, as you may know, incentives and credits for use of renewable energy. And some people would say, well, that's like what they're doing up in Washington. Should we be doing that in Florida?
Yeah.
Based on those economic freedom principles.
You sure we didn't run out of time? You know,
I think we did, right?
yeah. Well, let me tell you, you know, it's a very good question. It's also a very fair question. And let me say, in first off, I don't know all that's in the bill, but I hear what you've just said, and I was certainly in the buildings and around. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't mine to worry about every day, but I was aware of what was being worked on. I think there are. I do think that there are positive elements that are in the bill that will provide for when you have. I mean, here's the complexity of this kind of overall issue. What you have is unique players who have unique markets right now. And so it's not exactly as if you can call this a free market opportunity. When you turn your lights on tonight, you don't have a choice of walking over as you might on your way home tonight from going by one of the many different markets to buy milk or other necessities that you feel. When you hit that light switch, you have one choice. And which means for all of us, how do we provide for the mechanisms for the investment and resources to provide what I would hope for the long haul would be the lowest cost of energy for all of us? And let me just say this, I am a believer in nuclear energy. Some of you may not be, and that may turn heads, that may disappoint, but I believe that nuclear energy is going to be an important part of an energy portfolio. And so, under this arrangement, you have to look at who should absorb the risk for that. That means that testing, that development, that infrastructure, the probably 15 years of trying to get something built or constructed to achieve that in this state and in this country, the permitting for that. Now, my principles tell me there are shareholder risks to accept that. Who are the investors in that institution? Who are the owners of that institution? And that risk borne by them is how we judge almost any other free market choice that's made. Certainly, I can tell you there's a banker. We chose to build another branch site. So the question that was asked, we chose to invest in technology. We chose to invest in ATM machines. That was shareholder risk. But I would tell you, I question whether or not, under the present arrangement of structure that we have in this energy system that exists, whether with that kind of cost and complexity, that shareholders will alone be able to sustain an institution achieving that kind of innovation and offering of nuclear energy. And to that extent, can we find the fair way and the appropriate way where those who will benefit from the lower cost participate in development of that infrastructure? So I think that may be, comes down to one of the most difficult issues and decisions about the bill. Now you may have other parts that you're looking at, but I have said, and I've said this of recent, that that kind of burden, if placed upon the consumer, has to be a business plan with clarity, with benchmarks, with timeline and responsibility, if it's going to deliver on that kind of infrastructure promise of lower energy costs. And if it can be shown that those kinds of costs can be absorbed by present shareholders, well, then that's where the present cost should rest. But if that analysis is not going to be possible, then I think if we forego the opportunity to have lower cost of energy and have a diversified energy source, like nuclear power, which is the one that I would embrace, then I am receptive to looking at how we can fund this broader than unique shareholder risk. But I don't believe that a broader rate-paying base should pay for something that never comes to fruition, and I've expressed that. What else?
I think we better call it a night.
Save the best for last. There, yeah, okay.
That's, we want to thank you very much. It was a
Thank
very
you.
enlightening presentation.
Thanks,
Really
Dr.
improved.
Thank you. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
And that concludes our program for this evening, so thank you for coming.